To the next presentation, which is by Mr. Smith, as outlined in CMD 18H6.156. Mr. Smith, over to you.
Thank you. Good morning, Commissioners. Before I begin my main points, I think it's worth remembering that it's only the most engaged, the most informed, the most confident, and the most concerned people who speak to you today. And there may be many tens of people, hundreds of people, or even thousands of people who share our most basic concerns. And it's certainly beneficial that thousands did not show up or want to present at these hearings. But we speak not just on behalf of ourselves, but on friends and family who also share our concerns. In my submission, I mention the economic reality, or my perception of the economic reality of the Pickering nuclear power station. And I think it's worth pointing out why that may be relevant to yourselves in a safety hearing. Certainly when you look at risk, and in your case reasonable risk, it's a judgment of the dangers and the gains. To judge how risky a project is, it's worth thinking about how the dangers and the gains balance. So for example, a high-risk project which has an extremely high benefit may be reasonable risk. A low-risk project with medium benefit may be reasonable risk. What I believe we have at Pickering is a project which provides no benefit, and therefore, almost by definition, any risk is not reasonable. And even in the case where those beside me may believe that the risk is very, very low, if there are still no benefits, then the risk is unreasonable. And so perhaps later, if you are interested, there is some evidence here, I believe, that backs up why I believe the economic reality of Pickering is not positive. In terms of messaging, I certainly, when I moved to Toronto this September, did not know of the power plant. I did not know of any measures that I should be taking in the event of an accident, and I believe that many friends, residents, also do not know. However, I believe this point has been addressed. I've been listening to the hearings this week, and it seems that there is quite an agreement that maybe a bit more should be done in terms of spreading awareness within Toronto, so therefore I would support the request for ruling by the Canadian Environmental Law Association, the Durham Nuclear Awareness, and Greenpeace for the establishment and maintenance of a nuclear emergency preparedness public education programme for the Greater Toronto Area within Pickering's 50-kilometre ingestion planning zone. That would be something I would support. I believe we have examples of best practice from Bruce Power, and I've heard no good reason as to why not to follow best practice. Another concern I presented, which I'd like to expand upon, is that the siting standards may be met by APG in terms of how close a nuclear power station can be to a dense urban population. However, almost if you follow a kind of common sense test, by definition, a nuclear power station with a non-zero chance of nuclear disaster, if it can be situated so closely to a densely populated urban area, the standards must be inadequate. Even though IPG says it meets them, then I think it means that there's some worry about what these standards actually say and whether they are indeed fit for purpose. Indeed, a similar concern to do with zoning and the regulations. I don't think I've heard yet during this presentation this week a proper or a firm, convincing reason why the zoning standards are set at the, say for example, 10-kilometre limit for the detailed planning zone, or the 30 kilometres for the contingency planning zone, or the 50 for the ingestion zone. I read the PENR, and there doesn't seem to be any kind of reasoning behind why these distances are the ones that are being proposed. And I think it's worth wondering, why are these not extended, and why are particular measures only linked to particular zones, and why these shouldn't be expanded or more measures included in the more central zones. Moving on to non-humans, because of course there are more than just humans affected by this decision. In the CMD 18H6.1b, the supplementary information, it was reported that since 2011, with the exception of 2015 and 2017, Pickering Nuclear has met the 80% fish impingement reduction target. That's presented as a positive. However, it is slightly worrying that over 4 years, over the 7 years, 2 of the years, it wasn't successful. That's a pretty major, in percentage terms, that's a pretty major failing. And I wonder if the CNSC, when taking into consideration the licensing renewal, would be looking at that failure in those 2 years in deciding whether to renew the license or at least apply stronger conditions in making sure that these breaches, as reported here, breaches in the net and unexpected environmental conditions were the cause of those. It would certainly be nice to hear some firm measures which would be either enacted or looked at into making sure that doesn't happen again. A similarly odd point, which was again presented as positive in the report, but the data seem to suggest otherwise. Of the 14 safety and control areas, neither security nor radiation protection have met fully satisfactory requirements since 2015. And they describe their record as exceeding or meeting regulatory expectations in all SCAs, which may be correct. However, it's worrying that since 2015, and in the case I think of security since 2014, they have not been able, in the years coming after that, to bring up their standards to fully satisfactory. And certainly in view of renewing a license, if it takes 3 years and the standards have still not been increased, then to me that's cause for concern. And then finally, certainly I do not mean to offend or pass judgment here, but in terms of the main reason for Fukushima and the report which came out describing the main reason for its effects, the panel's chairman, Tokyo University professor Kiyoshi Kurakawa, he said it cannot be regarded as a natural disaster. And he emphasized that the real fault, the true failure of Fukushima was not an engineering flaw or an emergency response plan flaw, it was regulatory capture. And so I don't know the dynamic between the CNSC, OPG or the Government of Ontario, but I would like to stress that it would be comforting for residents such as myself that we can be confident that the CNSC, OPG and the Government of Ontario do maintain a responsible level of distance between themselves. And again, I say that not as an accusation, I do not know, but more as a kind of warning and a fear I have about the proximity that these organisations work together. And certainly when the Premier makes comments about the outcome of a safety hearing before it has concluded, it certainly is, to someone like myself, a worrying indication that there may be more political power than is comfortable. So again, not an accusation, but something that is certainly concerning for myself, and I would appreciate being reassured that political institutions do remain completely neutral. That's all. Thanks.
Thank you. Question? Ms. Penny?
Thank you for that. I wanted to follow up on your fish impingement.
Okay,
unfortunately, I don't think DFO is here this morning, but I wanted to give OPG and CNSC staff an opportunity to talk about why in those 2 years the fish impingement threshold was exceeded.
Okay.
So we'll start with OPG.
So Steve Gregoris for the record. I'm going to ask Raphael McCalla to speak to the issue.
Raphael McCall for the record. Pickering Nuclear's environmental program is protective of human health and the environment. And the program includes monitoring and mitigation associated with the aquatic environment as well. With respect to the fish diversion system, we're quite proud of its performance. There were 2 years, 2015 and 2017, where the 80% reduction was not met. In 2015, we had a slight breach in the net during the installation, and that resulted in an impingement event of about 6,000 kilograms of fish. The system was installed first in 2010, and as was mentioned, I believe earlier, we did do modifications to the system. So we learned in 2010, we installed, we made a modification where we installed an additional skirt on the net itself. So the net is actually in three components. You have a section of the net that's submerged, and then you actually have a skirt that sits on the top of the water column, and it's designed to aid in providing additional mitigation when the main section of the net becomes fouled with algae, and it allows the divers an opportunity to actually clean the net. We learned from the 2010 installation, and we installed an additional skirt on the net in 2011. So there's actually two sections. There's a section that's about 5 feet in length, and there's another section that's 8 feet in length. And both of those two sections are meant to allow our maintenance staff adequate time to actually clean the net and still provide adequate mitigation. So the point I'm trying to make is that we've learned over the years from the operation of the net. In 2017, we had the impingement event again in November, and I'd like to stress to the Commission that event occurred after we removed the net from service. We mentioned earlier, I think probably on Monday, I'm not sure which day we talked about it a bit, but we did mention that based on our investigation, it is OPG's belief that this was as a result of environmental factors where there was a change in the temperature, the lake temperature, and we believe that was a contributing factor to what we saw. And we continue to look for opportunities to see what we can do to continue to improve the performance. But we're quite proud of our performance. And yes, we do agree that there were 2 years, 2015 and 2017, where we did not meet the 80% reduction based on those events.
Thank you for that. And the DFO authorization, it actually authorizes you to have fish impingement and entrainment, right? And if you exceed the amount that's in the DFO authorization, what are the compliance requirements from DFO with respect to exceedances of the amount they have in the authorization?
Rafa Mikel, for the record. So you are correct. There are thresholds within the authorization. So there's a value of 3,619 kilograms as a limit, that if we were to exceed that value in two consecutive, if the average value were to be exceeded in 2 consecutive years, we would have to sit with DFO to look to see the causes and whether or not there's any need for us to consider additional offsets.
Thank you. CNSC staff?
Jerry Frabby, for the record, I'd ask Kaiser Solvay to talk about the impact.
Kaiser Solvay, I'm the Director of the Health Science and Environmental Compliance Division. So what OPG has provided is a good overview. I would add to that after the 2015 event, that was when the DFO authorization was an outcome of that event. And I think Mr. McAllister can speak further to that authorization. And again, in the 2017 event, Mr. McAllister mentioned on Monday, I believe, about the impact of that amount of alewife that was impinged and how the effect on the population was not deemed significant. So CNSC staff continues to have that oversight and will continue to work with DFO on if there would be further events. I'll pass it to Mr. McAllister.
Andrew McAllister, Director of the Environmental Risk Assessment Division. I just want to touch a bit too on the continued oversight that's going to be happening on the fish diversion system and its performance. OPG has provided on an annual basis a report on the impingement and on the performance of that net. That is going to continue during the proposed licensing period. That will be reviewed by CNSC, reviewed by DFO as well. And if there are trends or aspects that warrant further follow-up, we will do so under the regulatory oversight. So we have an annual impingement monitoring that's going to continue, as well as a condition of the Fisheries Act authorization is the need to repeat their entrainment monitoring study. And in that authorization, that is slated for 2021. So we will continue to update the Commission on these matters through our regulatory oversight report. And the results of that will also be rolled into the environmental risk assessment that gets updated on a 5-year basis. So from CNSC staff's perspective, there will be a lot of regulatory oversight over that performance of that fish diversion system through ourselves under the Nuclear Safety Control Act and through DFO under the Fisheries Act.
Thank you. Question?
More a comment. So yours is a very thoughtful presentation, and you've clearly been listening to the hearings over the week. I was just surprised that it seemed so one-sided. We've heard so much evidence on all the good things that OPG and CNSC have been doing in making sure that in spite of the age of the plant, that it's operating better now than it ever has, and they made a commitment that it will at the end of its life. And all the independent reassurance that has also been provided that the plant is operating well, that it's got what it takes to be running safely. Were you not compelled by those arguments and persuaded by them?
In terms of, to your first point, the reason why I'm presenting here the failures is because I think these are the most pressing concerns, and these are the concerns which are not advocated the most. Certainly there's very, very few times when people are able to present their concerns. It's only normally during these renewal kind of hearings that we get to present these concerns. And I think the positives and what OPG have done well are well explained, and you're very well aware of these. However, you may not be as aware of the failings.
Thank you very much for your presentation. It's well spoken. One of the points that came up, and one of the first things you mentioned, was the fact that you believe that there's zero benefit to the Pickering plant per se. And I've heard this from a number of interveners, and because you're articulate, could you please explain in your own words why you believe that's the case?
Sorry, I just didn't catch the last one.
Why do you believe that there's zero benefit to a plant like Pickering?
I don't think, did I say there was zero benefit myself? Yeah.
Your words were no benefit. There's no benefit.
When you look, I think, so when looking at kind of the benefit of a project, right, you look at the overall implications. So if you're looking in terms of the lifetime of a project, then I don't think there are any benefits. That you look at the dangers that there are, you look at the safety, the safety concerns that there are, and if there are no economic, there's no economic positives. I mean, that's independently provided. I've got the information here for that. There seem to be no positives in terms of the energy. The energy does not seem to be required. There are no environmental benefits. There's no environmental benefits from having a power station. There are no societal benefits in terms of having it there. Maybe on its own, it may seem like it's got benefits, but you're not just looking at whether this individual plant brings benefits or problems. You're looking at the other alternatives, which may be better. For example, energy output. If they say, yeah, well, it's great, it keeps down energy costs low, well, Pickering is not the only thing that can keep energy costs low. There are other alternatives, other sources of energy. So I feel like every benefit is not unique to Pickering. Other methods have the same benefits without the risks. Does that make sense? Do you want me to re-articulate?
So what you're really saying is it's not that there's no benefit, it's just that comparatively speaking, the benefit is marginal. Maybe that's a better way of putting it?
That's true,
yeah.
But more the point I was getting at is the benefits are not unique to Pickering. So if you're proclaiming that one benefit is energy costs are low, well, that's great, but it's not unique to Pickering. We don't need the safety implications that come with a nuclear station to reduce our energy costs. Or we don't need jobs, is another big argument used, right? We don't need Pickering as a plant to provide jobs for all of Ontario. There are, again, alternatives. So when you have a project which is so dangerous or so harmful, the benefits are not unique to Pickering.
Anybody else?
Randy Lockwood for the record, if I may. And President Binder, I'm certainly going to respect your cautions around cost and associated, so I will not speak to any of those. And I believe our CEO spoke to both cost and the opportunities of...
You can speak about it. It's not an hour Monday, though.
Yeah. I am observing your caution there. But in that regard, this license hearing, as you rightfully pointed out, was on safety and reliability of Pickering, and that's where I'll stay focused. But it's hard not to say something here. And broadly speaking, that we spoke to the long-term energy plan and why we're looking for an operating license for 10 years and why we're looking to take Pickering out to the end of 2024, and it's to provide baseload energy during the refurbishment of the other nuclear units at both Darlington and Bruce site. As well, I would like to point out that the nuclear in generation in the province is a large reason why this province is off coal, why coal is shut down. We did point out to you that one of the benefits, since you were asking about benefits, and I'll reiterate what our CEO said on the opening on Monday, was that the continued operation of Pickering would result in approximately, and we think it's conservative, 17 million tons reduction of greenhouse gases, which equates to around 3.4 million cars off Ontario roads each year. And lastly, I'm going to point out, because I think this part's very important, and it speaks to that we do really care, that the province, in terms of the energy sector, electricity energy sector, has the lowest carbon emissions in the world. And we should be proud of that in Ontario.
Okay, just one point. I don't know if you had a chance to hear in the last 2 days, I opened remarks about our independence. I know that you said you're not accusing us not being independent, so just let you assure you, I've never been more independent in my life, and I can speak for every commissioner here. We don't listen to what political authority is saying. We say our own thing, and we decide our own thing. So that's the only assurance I can give you.
Thank you.
You now have the final word.
Okay. Am I allowed to respond as a final word to the comments made, or is it a more general? Okay. In terms of, we got slightly perhaps distracted with the kind of benefits cost argument. I'd again reiterate that when looking at safety, you do have to balance the dangers as well as the benefits. That's why it's a relevant question. The benefits are important. And for example, I'm reading right here, this is the Making Connections Straight Talk About Electricity in Ontario 2018 provided by the Environmental Commissioner of Ontario. It says there has been no independent review of whether the Pickering extension still makes environmental and financial sense for Ontario. And there's all sorts of comments in here which do not convince me that these benefits which have been proclaimed are indeed the true picture. We're not getting the true picture necessarily from OPG, and documents such as this seem to provide evidence for that. That's all. Yeah. Thank you.